You're not poor, you're middle class, but you're on the brink. The mechanic calls, $400, and there's ice in your stomach because your bank account is at zero. Not because of your morning coffee, not because of a vacation, but because everything is already allocated: mortgage, insurance, student loan, daycare, electricity. 78% of your income is locked in a frozen budget, and the unexpected is your enemy. Do you know that taste? Metallic, in your throat. When you realize, even at $75,000 a year, one hiccup, and everything crumbles. The economy is growing. The stock market is celebrating. Corporations are laughing in conference rooms, and you're quietly calculating if you can survive the week without gas. Why? Because the game has changed. But the rules weren't announced. In 1971, 60% of families were middle class. Today, it's half. 1 in 10 of those who paid their bills yesterday is now choosing medicine or gas. This isn't a failure. It's a result. The top 1% has tripled its share of national income in 50 years. And your real wages? Stagnant. Growth went up, but not for you. And this is where it gets interesting. Your job isn't threatened by laziness. It's threatened by an algorithm. A robot in the warehouse works tirelessly. AI in accounting doesn't ask for vacation. And an app decides when you work, how much, and for how much. Your boss isn't a person. Your boss is code. And this code doesn't know your child is sick, doesn't know your car broke down. It knows only one thing: if you don't turn on your geolocation at 6 a.m., you're replaceable. Imagine you did everything right: degree, experience, discipline, and the system says, you're obsolete. NAFTA opened borders. Technology accelerated everything, and you're left with debts and an empty account. It's not your fault. It's the design, and it's already in motion. You're not alone, but you're trapped. And that trap is called stability that no longer exists. Javier Rodriguez woke up at 5 a.m. as always. The welding machine was already waiting in the workshop. For 22 years he had worked at the same factory in Houston, first as an apprentice, then a master, then a mentor for newcomers. His hands knew every weld, every bolt, every current setting. In 2004 he was 46. His children were in college. The mortgage was almost paid off. And then Monday came. Locks on the gates. A notice on the door. Production moved to Monterrey. No warning. No negotiations. Just, it was over. Javier stood by the fence and watched as trucks carried away the equipment he had assembled for years. The air smelled of oil and dust, familiar scents that now signified the end of an era. A year later he became an Uber driver. Not because he wanted to, but because there was no choice. His profession, like thousands of others in the Rust Belt, disappeared not due to decline, but due to calculation. In Mexico, the same welder cost the company 8 times less. It all started with one document. In 1994, President Bill Clinton signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. On paper, it looked like a victory: cheap goods, open markets, export growth. But behind those words lay a different logic. Corporations gained the right to move production to Mexico, where labor was 5 or even 10 times cheaper, and they took advantage of it. From 1995 to 2005, over 850,000 manufacturing jobs in the U.S. were eliminated directly due to outsourcing, according to the Economic Policy Institute. Decisions were not made based on loyalty to workers or cities. They were made based on profit. Every dollar saved on wages went into shareholders' pockets, and the workers to nowhere. NAFTA became not a bridge between countries, but an axe that severed the connection between labor and dignity. But the consequences didn't just hit those on the factory floor. When factories closed, it wasn't just jobs that disappeared. Taxes disappeared. And without taxes, no schools, no fire stations, no city buses. In the congressional archives, there are still letters from mayors in the Rust Belt. Desperate, almost pleas. We are losing entire generations. In one Ohio town, after the steel mill closed, 3 schools and 2 hospitals closed. You didn't just lose your job. You lost the street where your children grew up. You lost the cafe where you drank coffee in the mornings. You lost your future. And all of this for a few cents of savings on each manufactured good. Studies by the Brookings Institution show that in counties affected by outsourcing, the mortality rate rose by 12% in 10 years, not from hunger, but from despair, suicides, overdoses, stress-related illnesses. This wasn't just an economic downturn, it was a silent epidemic. Production moved abroad, but technology came within, and it proved to be far more ruthless. Because while a factory could be closed and a worker laid off, a robot demands no salary, no break, no respect. It just works. And all that's left for a human is to watch as a machine takes their place. The next story isn't about borders, it's about warehouses, about code, about systems that don't see you as a person, only a variable in the profit equation. And unlike NAFTA, this threat cannot be accused of betrayal. It has no face, only a screen, only an algorithm, only the silence in which robot motors hum. Sarah M. knew every inch of the Columbus warehouse. For 18 years, she ensured no package was lost, no truck delayed. She had a voice that even the most stubborn drivers obeyed. Then came the robotic manipulators. First, in a corner, then throughout the entire facility. Silent, precise, tireless. 3 months after the automated inventory system was implemented, Sarah received a notice. Her position was eliminated. Not because of errors, not because of cutbacks. Simply, the system now decided where to move boxes itself. On her last day, she stood by the door and watched as metallic arms lifted goods that she had mentally distributed for years. The air smelled of plastic and ozone, the scent of a future where there was no place for her. Do you think this is an exception? You're mistaken. Since 2010, logistics has become a testing ground for automation. Robots, drones, algorithms, these aren't just engineers' dreams. They're calculations. If a machine does a task 20% cheaper, it will replace a human. And it works. According to McKinsey, by 2025, almost 45% of all current job tasks in the U.S. could be automated, especially where work is repetitive. Warehouses, accounting, office support. The system doesn't want your advice. It wants accuracy, and accuracy is a robot. Do you think that if you're not in a warehouse, you're safe? You're mistaken. Automation doesn't stop at the factory doors. It's already in your office, in your email, in your schedule. Anything that can be reduced to rules is under threat. Analysts, coordinators, support specialists, their tasks are increasingly handled by software. You might have a degree, experience, connections, but if your job consists of repetitive actions, an algorithm will do it faster and cheaper. Technology removes not just hands, it removes minds. And the scariest part is, you might not notice your role shrinking until one day you find yourself an redundant element in the profit equation. Imagine, you come to work, and the system already knows you're not needed. Not because of laziness, not because of mistakes. Simply, you're more expensive than code. Your palms sweat when you check your email in the morning. Your heart skips a beat with every HR notification. Because you feel the next step isn't yours. It's written in logic that you don't see, but which is already deciding for you. You are a variable. And if it can be reset to 0 to increase profit, it will be. When machines replace people, only one thing remains: flexibility. That's what they tell us. But in reality, chaos remains. The gig economy promises freedom of choice, but offers only the illusion of control. No contract, no schedule, no guarantees. The next chapter is about how freedom turned into a trap, and how the algorithm became your boss, faceless, voiceless, merciless. Javier R. now drives around Houston. The app on his phone is his boss. It tells him where to go, how much to take, when to rest. Sometimes he earns $200 a day, sometimes $30. No schedule, no vacation, no insurance. If he gets sick, he won't get a cent. One day his daughter asked, "Dad, are you working today?" He looked at the screen. The algorithm hadn't sent an order yet. He didn't know the answer. He's been driving for 8 years, and every day is like a lottery. Freedom? Yes, but freedom without support is a fall. His fingers are used to the vibration of notifications, his eyes to the green and red dots on the map. He is no longer a welder. He is an executor of commands, and his only asset is time that he cannot get back. The gig economy isn't just new apps. It's a new employment model. Companies have abandoned permanent employees in favor of freelancers because it's cheaper and more flexible. No pension contributions, no sick pay, no responsibility, and the key tool is just-in-time staffing. At Walmart or Target, shift schedules are generated by an algorithm 48 hours in advance. You don't know if you'll be working tomorrow morning or night. You can't plan childcare, a second job, even a doctor's visit. For the company, it's optimization. For you, constant stress. Studies show that 68% of workers in the retail gig economy experience chronic anxiety due to unpredictable income and schedules. This isn't work, it's real-time survival. The worst part is, you can't argue with an algorithm. It doesn't listen. It doesn't explain. It simply lowers your rating if you cancel an order, or pays less if there are many drivers in the area. Your income isn't the result of your labor. It's the result of mathematics. And you're not an employee. You're a service provider. Legally, you're not an Uber employee. You're an independent contractor. And that means you have no rights, no voice, no protection. The algorithm decides everything. And you only execute. And even if you work 60 hours a week, you're not entitled to overtime because you're your own boss. This irony isn't a system error. It's its essence. Without a contract, no power. Without power, no negotiations. And without negotiations, no unions. And this is no accident. It's a system. The next chapter is about how the collective power that once protected millions was shattered, and how loneliness became the norm. Because when you're alone, it's easy to ignore you. But when you're part of a mass, you have to be listened to. But the mass is gone. Only individual dots on the map remain, waiting for a signal from the algorithm. In 1980, Javier's father stood at the factory gates with a placard in his hand. The union demanded that family health insurance be maintained. 3 days later, the factory agreed. Back then, workers spoke in unison, and they were heard. Sarah remembers meetings in the conference room, coffee, arguments, decisions made together. Today, only an email. Terms of employment updated. By continuing to work, you agree. No votes, no negotiations. Only silence, in which keys click and servers hum. Archival. Footage is the only trace of an era when your work mattered not only to the company but also to those who stood beside you. Today you are not a colleague, you are a resource. And a resource does not argue. The decline of union power is not natural selection, it's a result. In the 1950s, 37% of private sector workers were union members. Today, less than 10%. Corporations have lobbied for years to weaken strikes. They intimidated, fired activists, called unions relics, and then simply stopped caring. And here's the result. From 1979 to 2019, labor productivity increased by 62%. Wages, only by 17%. The difference went up. To CEO offices, to shareholder dividends, to algorithms that now decide how much you're worth. But even if you want to raise your voice today, the law may not grant you that right. Because you are not an employee, you are an independent contractor. Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, they all litigate to the last to maintain this status. Why? Because the National Labor Relations Act does not protect contractors. You have no right to a union, no right to collective bargaining. You are alone, completely alone. The algorithm knows this. It doesn't just send you to an address, it isolates you. No lunch table, no locker room where you can complain, no meetings, just you, your phone, and a road that never ends. Imagine, you try to negotiate with other drivers, but you don't even know who they are. The algorithm doesn't show you. It keeps you apart, because together you are dangerous. Together you can demand a fixed rate. Together you can say no to night shifts. But fragmented, you are just numbers on a screen. And the system uses this. Do you know this feeling? When you want to scream, but there's no one to hear? This is not weakness. This is design. Loneliness is not your choice. It's a tool of control. And it works. Because as long as you stay silent individually, the system continues to rewrite the rules. And the next rule is about how the cost of living soared while your salary remained on the ground. Even a Harvard degree won't save you if the market decides you're disposable. Imagine you live in San Francisco. You have an MIT degree. You write code for a startup that promises to change the world. Your salary is $100,000 a year, yet every night you sleep in a 2009 Honda Civic. Not because you haven't tried to rent an apartment. You have. But a one-bedroom apartment is $3,800, and your after-tax salary is $2,600. You pay more for housing than you earn. You're not homeless. You're an accounting error in a system where success no longer guarantees a roof over your head. Do you know this feeling? When you do everything right, study, work, pay taxes, and still can't afford a child seat for your car because the insurance bill arrived the same day as the notification of a 15% rent increase. This isn't failure, it's logic. Since 1980, real wages have grown by only 12%, while housing has tripled, education quadrupled, medicine quintupled. The system no longer links labor to dignity, it links labor to debt. You can earn $120,000 a year and still eat oatmeal with water 3 times a day, especially if you're in Seattle, in Boston, in New York. These cities aren't just metropolises. They are epicenters of a paradox. The more innovation there is, the more homeless people there are. In San Francisco, for every 10,000 residents, there are 82 homeless people, the highest rate in the country. Among them are former teachers, nurses, engineers. Not lazy, not stupid, just those whose salaries couldn't keep up with the race against prices for every square foot. Look here, 78% of the average family's income goes to fixed payments, housing, loans, insurance. Almost nothing is left. And then the mechanic calls, $400, and there's ice in your stomach. Not because of coffee, not because of vacation, but because the system has turned stability into a luxury, even for those who did everything right. Housing is no longer a home. Housing is an asset. It's bought up by funds, REITs, investors who will never set foot on your street. They don't see your nights in the car. They see a return on investment. And every payment you make isn't a step towards stability. It's a brick in their mansion. You're not losing the race. You're running on a treadmill that someone silently sped up. Remember this moment, even success doesn't save you. Because the system redistributes everything, upwards. And the next question isn't about how much you earn, but about who takes everything that's left after your last payment. 1997. Boardroom. Glass, leather, air conditioning humming quieter than a conscience. On the screen, graphs. One of the vice presidents says, "We move assembly to Mexico. We'll cut costs by 60%. No one asks about Mary from Ohio, who's been paying her mortgage for 42 years. No one thinks about how her son will get to school without a bus, because the city can no longer afford it. The decision is made in 12 minutes. A year later, the factory is dead. The workshops, empty eye sockets. And in the report, a rise in EBITDA margin. The board of directors aren't villains. They simply don't see those they erase for the sake of a number. Since 1980, corporate profits as a share of national income have grown by 40%. Today, 26% of the entire GDP. A record. And the share of wages? 43%. The lowest level since 1947. This is no accident. This is policy. The corporate income tax was cut from 35 to 21%. Lobbyists secured the repeal of rules that prevented profits from being siphoned offshore. The largest companies today pay 30% less in taxes than in the 90s. Wealth doesn't disappear, it flows. From your paychecks into the portfolios of the top 1% who own 53% of all stocks. From your cities into funds registered in the Cayman Islands. From your lives into their reports. Since 2000, 52% of all new wealth in the U.S. has gone to the top 1%. 1%. Half of all growth. In 20 years, the economy grew by $50 trillion, and more than half went to a handful of people. This isn't theory. This is data from the Brookings Institution. These are tax figures. These are MIT calculations. If the distribution had remained as it was in 1980, your family would be earning $50,000 a year more. But the system is structured differently, and every hour you work, it's not working for you, but for those who can no longer spend all they have, even in 10 lifetimes. Do you know this feeling? When you know, you're not lazy, You're not stupid. You're not losing. You're just being robbed, quietly, legally, through tax codes and boardrooms. Wealth doesn't evaporate. It just flows upwards. And as long as this continues, stability, it's not your right. It's their privilege. Sarah sits at her kitchen table. In front of her, a dentist's bill, $850. She looks at her phone, $217 in her account. Tomorrow is payday. But today, nothing. Her heart beats faster, a metallic taste in her mouth. Not from fear, from humiliation. 5 years ago, she managed a warehouse. She had insurance, vacation, respect. Today, a call center, food delivery, and still, she can't break a tooth, can't catch a cold, can't afford a mistake. Every click in the app, it's not freedom. It's an attempt not to fall. Do you know this feeling? When you know you did everything right, and the system just disappeared from under your feet. This is called financial fragility. The term was coined by an MIT economist. It means one thing: you cannot cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing or selling something. According to the Federal Reserve, 37% of families are in this situation. But if you add those who will only survive by emptying their account to zero, it comes to 78%, 78, almost 4 out of 5. This is not poverty. This is the new normal. You eat, you pay your bills, but you can't break a leg, can't lose your job for a week, can't get sick, because you don't have a cushion, only a rope, and you're on it every day. Imagine you have a degree, experience, even 2 sources of income, but 78% of your earnings go to housing, loans, insurance, electricity, internet, school. Scraps are left for food, for gas, to avoid going insane. And then, the call. The car broke down. The child is in the hospital. And there's ice in your stomach. Not because you're irresponsible, because the system demands you be perfect without the right to be human. Not even once. You're not lazy. You're not stupid. You're a victim of design. Globalization moved factories abroad. Automation replaced you with code. The gig economy stripped away schedules, vacations, sick leave. Taxes shifted trillions upwards, and you were told, it's your fault. But that's a lie. Stability didn't disappear on its own. It was removed, so that profits would grow, so that the algorithm would decide for you, so that you would remain silent, out of fear that tomorrow there would be no order. Look here, even with an income of $100,000 a year, you can sleep in your car, because housing consumes 60%. Because the system no longer links labor to security. It links labor to debt, to anxiety, to the constant expectation of a fall. But know one thing: you are not alone, and you are not to blame. Because if 78% have a problem, it's not a personal failure. It's a systemic malfunction. And a malfunction can be fixed. First, you just have to stop believing that it's normal. All these forces are not individual enemies. They are a single mechanism, a machine silently rebuilt. Before it forged stability, the factory provided work, the union, protection, the mortgage, a future. Now it runs on overdrive. NAFTA opened the floodgates. 5 million manufacturing jobs disappeared in 20 years. Technology drove a wedge. Robots in Amazon warehouses replaced 1 in 3. Gig platforms normalized unpredictability. Walmart schedules are generated 48 hours in advance, like concert tickets. Unions weakened, from 20% membership to 10%. Prices for housing, school, hospitals soared. Wages did not. Corporations cut taxes and paid shareholders $1.3 trillion in 2022 alone. And all of this is not chaos. It's a system. It's not collapsing. It's redistributing. From your hands, into their portfolios, under the guise of progress. Sarah M. no longer looks at the screen with a layoff notification. She sits at the same kitchen table, but now in front of her is a laptop with a cybersecurity course. 18 months. Loans. A night shift at the call center. But every click is a step away from the algorithm that decides her worth. Javier R. doesn't wait for a signal from the app. He meets other drivers in the park where his factory once stood. Together they build a cooperative, not for strikes, but for fares that cover gas and insurance. They use the same digital tools as Uber, but in reverse, not for control, but for connection. And Dr. Emily Chen, publishes new models, digital unions, universal basic income, a tax on automation. Their stories are not an end. They are a beginning. Quiet, stubborn, without slogans, with code, contracts, and lists of demands. The middle class isn't disappearing. It's being dismantled, bolt by bolt, line of code by line of code, by a schedule generated in 2 days. Every factory in Monterey is a street without a school in Ohio. Every robot in an Amazon warehouse is Sarah, who can't afford to fix her tooth. Every dollar offshore is a fire station that was closed. According to the Tax Justice Network, $100 billion leave the U.S. annually, bypassing your schools, your hospitals, your lives. And here's the key. This is not inevitability. This is a choice by the board of directors, a choice by the legislator, a choice by a system that calls it efficiency. And while you think you're falling due to your own weakness, the next blow is already gathering momentum. But falling is not the end. It's a signal that it's time not to jump higher, but to change the floor. Do you believe that middle-class stability can be restored? Or is it already a thing of the past? Write in the comments, restore or past.